The rain had been falling for hours, soaking the dusty backroads of Wyoming into thick clay. Mud clung to boots, to wagon wheels, to the aching bones of the land. Out on the long stretch of road past Canyon Creek, a rusted old truck sputtered and died just as the last light of day dipped behind the hills. The silence that followed was heavier than the sky. From the passenger side, the door creaked open with hesitation. A small figure climbed out, barely visible beneath a too-big patch-sewn coat and an old straw hat nearly hiding her eyes. She looked about 10, maybe 11, though the sorrow in her steps made her seem older. One hand held tightly onto the straps of a battered duffel bag. The other clutched a piece of paper, damp and crinkled, though her fingers trembled too much to hold it still. The child stood alone beside the truck, blinking against the rain, staring at the looming wooden gate a few yards away. Beyond the gate, past wind-churned prairie grass and a barking dog, was the silhouette of a ranch house, a chimney puffing smoke into the storm-gray sky, golden light flickering faintly through the front window. She hesitated, her worn shoes sinking into the mud, and looked down at the paper again. It was smudged with water now, almost unreadable. It had her mother's handwriting on it, just a name, just an address. The one her mother had whispered when her eyes could no longer stay open. "You go to him, baby. He'll help you. Just for a day. He's kind. He owes me." So she walked out. Her steps made small, squelching sounds as she neared the front porch. The dog, an old black lab with graying fur, barked once, then stopped as if sensing the pain in the little girl's heart. She climbed the wooden steps with the hesitancy of someone who didn't know if doors were still allowed to open for her. Then she knocked. The door opened just enough for a tall, broad-shouldered man to step out, lantern light throwing shadows across his lined face. He wore a denim shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and a wide-brimmed hat he didn't bother to take off. The rancher looked down at her, silent. The girl tried to speak. Her lips moved, but all that came out was a choked whisper. "My mama? She died today." He said nothing, just looked at her, really looked. Rainwater slid down the brim of his hat and dripped from his coat. The girl's voice was shaking now. She said, "You knew her, and I didn't know where else to go. I don't got no daddy. I don't got nobody." The man glanced out at the truck behind her, the stillness of it. He saw it, he saw everything. The world had abandoned this child. I just need to stay for one day," she said, voice cracking under the weight of her grief. "Just one day, then I'll go." The rancher didn't answer at first. He studied the tiny soaked figure in front of him, the bruises of sorrow, the too thin arms, the trembling hands. She stared up at him, eyes wide and swollen from crying. Eyes like her mother's, that same stubborn brown, that same look of heartbreak trying to be brave. "Please," she added softly. Just a day. A long silence passed. The rain drummed on the tin roof above. Then he moved aside. "You can stay," he said quietly. His voice was gravel wrapped in velvet. He waited just long enough, then added, "You can stay forever." The girl's breath caught in her throat. For a moment she didn't move. She just looked up at him, unsure if she'd heard right. Then, slowly, she stepped inside. The warmth of the house wrapped around her like a blanket she hadn't felt in years. The scent of wood smoke, wet leather, and warm bread curled into her nose. The dog came over and nuzzled her hand. She dropped her bag on the floor and looked up at the man once more. He didn't smile, but his eyes had softened. "I got soup on the stove," he said. "Come eat." She nodded and followed him toward the kitchen, boots leaving muddy prints behind her. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, didn't know if the world would stay this kind. But for now, for this moment, she was safe. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she let herself believe she just might not be alone anymore. The next morning the sky had cleared, leaving the land washed clean in the cool hush after rain. Sunlight peeked through the parted curtains, casting strips of gold across the wooden floor. Inside the ranch house, the warmth of the hearth still lingered, though the embers had burned low in the fireplace. Silas Boone rose before dawn, as he always had. It was the only rhythm he trusted. The work, the stillness, the animals who asked for nothing more than care and routine. He brewed coffee in a battered kettle, poured it into a thick clay mug, and leaned against the counter. His eyes kept drifting toward the closed door of the guest room. He hadn't meant it when he said she could stay forever. Had he? Maybe it just came out. Maybe it was because he saw something in her eyes that night, something raw, something aching and alone. Or maybe it was guilt. A long time ago, he'd made a promise to someone, and when she passed on, he let that promise die too, until last night, when a little girl showed up carrying the ghost of it right to his doorstep. She hadn't spoken much after dinner. She'd eaten slowly, cautiously, like she didn't quite believe the food was hers to keep. When he showed her the guest room, his late wife's old sewing room, cleared out years ago but still lined with sun-faded wallpaper and a rocking chair that never quite stopped creaking, she only nodded. She'd set her bag on the floor, climbed under the patchwork quilt, and gone to sleep without another word. Now, in the soft glow of morning, he found her already outside. She stood barefoot in the dirt beside the chicken coop, sleeves rolled up past her elbows, hair tied back in a loose ribbon she must have pulled from her bag. A dented metal pail hung from one small arm. She was feeding the hens, moving slow, careful, like she'd done it before but was still trying to remember how. Silas walked up behind her quietly. "You ever worked a ranch?" he asked. She jumped a little at his voice but didn't run. Just looked up at him with those same wide brown eyes and said, "My mama kept a few birds and a goat named Buttons. We lived out near Larkspur. Wasn't much of a ranch." He nodded. Larkspur. That was 2 towns over. Quiet, dirt roads. Nothing but hills and weather and folks trying to keep things together. What happened to the goat? She swallowed. Her hand stilled. Sheriff said he'd take her, she whispered. Said maybe someone else could use her milk. Silas didn't ask more. He didn't need to. He remembered what the sheriff told him when he rode out to that cabin yesterday. Small fire. 1 bed. Woman in her 30s. Consumption. Lasted longer than she should have. He'd stood at her grave for a long time, said nothing. He hadn't seen her in over 10 years, and yet there she was, buried beneath a plain wooden cross, and no one to say goodbye but a stranger and her daughter. She must have written his name on that paper before she passed. Must have told the child to find him. Silas Boone, the man who once danced with her in the firelight behind the saloon. The man who gave her a blanket and a place to sleep when she was 18 and running from everything. He didn't love her, not like that. But he never forgot her. And now her child was standing here in his yard, scattering seed with tiny fingers. "Well," he said at last, "you've got a steady hand. That helps." She looked up again. "Am I doing it right?" He tilted his head, scratched his chin. "Hens ain't complained yet." That got her to smile. Barely. But it was there. After chores, he made her a breakfast of biscuits and eggs. She sat at the table in silence, swinging her legs under the chair. Occasionally, she peeked at the photographs lining the mantel, an old wedding portrait, faded landscapes, one of a dark-haired woman standing beside a horse. "Is that your wife?" she asked. Silas looked up from his coffee. "Was a long time ago." "What happened to her?" He didn't flinch. "Same thing that happens to everyone. Time." She nodded solemnly, like she understood. "Do you got any kids?" "No." "Oh." Silas could see the question lingering behind her eyes, but she didn't ask it. She didn't need to. He already knew what she was thinking, so he said it first. Wasn't. In the cards, I guess. A heavy silence followed. Then she whispered, I ain't never had a daddy. Silas blinked, staring into his coffee cup like it held answers. When he looked up, she was watching him with something fragile hope, maybe. Or the last sliver of it. I could leave after today, she added quickly. Didn't mean to be a bother. Just didn't know where else to go. You ain't a bother, he said flatly. She nodded and went quiet again. They spent the rest of the day fixing a broken hinge on the barn door, hauling hay into the loft and walking the fence line while the sun warmed the fields. He showed her how to whistle to the horses. She taught him how to braid grass into a crown. That evening, they sat on the porch together. She curled up in the rocking chair with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her eyes drooping. He smoked his pipe in silence. Mr. Boone? She asked sleepily. What happens tomorrow? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared out at the hills turning lavender in the dusk. The cicadas had begun to sing. A pair of doves fluttered into the eaves. Somewhere deep in the house, the kettle began to whistle. Don't rightly know, he said at last. Guess we'll find out together. She smiled again, this time real, unguarded, and closed her eyes. And as he watched her drift into sleep, Silas Boone realized something he hadn't dared believe in years. One day had already become another. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't the end of the road anymore. Maybe it was the start of something whole. The wind shifted as autumn settled over the hills. The dry heat of summer gave way to crisp mornings, and a haze of golden leaves began to paint the trees that lined the back pasture. The land was slowing down, resting, preparing for winter. And so, in his own quiet way, was Silas Boone. It had been nearly 3 weeks since the little girl came knocking. Since she stood on his porch, too small for her grief, too brave for her age. Since she asked to stay just for a day. She hadn't left. Her duffel still sat in the corner of the guest room, only now it was unpacked. Her few belongings, a second dress, a chipped hairbrush, a hand-stitched Bible with her name written in shaky letters, had found new homes on the shelves. On the dresser, in a drawer he cleared for her without saying much about it. She'd taken to folding her clothes carefully, smoothing the wrinkles like it mattered. Like it was hers now. Every morning she rose early without complaint. Silas would find her already feeding the hens or sweeping the porch with a too-big broom. She was quiet, still shy, but she moved with purpose, the kind of purpose that children carry when they've known too much loss too young. He hadn't expected how natural it would feel, this strange rhythm of life with someone else. In the house again. The place had been silent for so long. Too long. After his wife, Clara, passed, the rooms had shrunk around him, each echo like a whisper of everything that never happened. The nursery that never filled, the toys never bought, the footsteps never heard. But now there was Lila. That was her name. He finally learned it after 3 days. She said it quietly one evening when he handed her a mug of warm cider and asked, "What should I call you, little one?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Lila Grace," a simple name. But it stayed with him, like a prayer that clung to the corners of his mind. One Saturday morning, Silas saddled up his horse and hitched the old wagon. He told Lila they were heading to town. She didn't ask why. She simply climbed in and wrapped her coat tight around herself. When they reached the general store, the townsfolk took notice. It wasn't every day Silas Boone came into town with a child riding beside him. Whispers stirred like dust in the wind. Some were curious, some suspicious. That Boone fella didn't know he had kin. Where'd that girl come from? She's awful pale. Poor thing, looks like she's seen a ghost. Layla clung a little closer to his side as they stepped into the mercantile. But Silas held steady. He led her down every aisle, letting her pick out what she needed. New shoes, a wool coat, warm socks, ribbons, pencils, a proper school bag. "Don't need all this," she whispered. "I can make do." "No, you can," Silas said, placing the coat in her arms. "But now you don't have to." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with something that was almost disbelief. Outside, a widow named Edna May approached him. Her voice was sweet, but her tone laced with suggestion. "You know, Silas, it's awful kind of you tacking her in. But little girls need proper raising. You sure you're up for it?" Silas turned to her slowly. "I didn't ask if I was up for it, Edna. She asked if she could stay." "Still, folks might talk. Let 'em." He placed his hat back on his head and walked Layla to the wagon without another word. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than anything they could say. Back at the ranch, things began to change. Little things at first. Silas dusted off the old piano in the front room, the one Clara used to play. Layla sat on the bench some nights, plunking out melodies by ear. It was out of tune, but he didn't care. The sound filled the house in a way. Nothing else could. He began making supper earlier so they could eat together. She told him stories about her goat, Buttons, and how her mother used to make music by tapping pots with wooden spoons. Sometimes Silas would catch himself laughing. It felt foreign. But one afternoon, while fixing a fence post, Lila asked, "Did you ever want kids?" Silas paused, hammer in hand. "Your wife, did she?" He set the hammer down, wiped his hands on a rag. Then he nodded. "She wanted a dozen," he said. "I told her one would have been enough. What happened?" He looked at her and didn't try to smile. "God had other plans, I reckon." Layla didn't press. She just nodded solemnly. That night, she set the table with an extra plate, just like that. No explanation, no mention of it. He didn't ask who it was for. He just left it there. There were hard nights, too. Sometimes Layla would wake up crying, curled in a ball, whispering for her mama. Silas would sit by her bedside, silent, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. Other times she'd shut down entirely, going quiet for days, moving like a ghost through the house. Grief didn't obey rules. He knew that. So he didn't try to fix it. He just stayed, present, steady. One evening, she stood in the doorway of the barn while he was brushing down one of the mares. She clutched a drawing in her hands. Crayon on wrinkled paper. "It's us," she said. He turned. Took it gently. The picture was childlike, crooked lines and all. A little girl holding the hand of a tall man with a cowboy hat. A house. A horse. A sun with a smile. She'd written one word at the top in pink. Home. Silas's throat tightened. He stared at it for a long time. Then he folded it carefully and placed it in his shirt pocket right over his heart. He didn't say a word. He just reached over, pulled her into his arms, and held her there, the way he never got to hold a child of his own, the way he should have held her mother once when she needed it. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Winter was coming. People were still whispering, and there would always be more questions than answers. But for now, the house wasn't empty anymore, and neither was he. Winter came hard and fast to the ranch that year. The first frost kissed the fields before Halloween, and by early November, the hills were blanketed in white. Smoke rolled thick from the chimney of Silas Boone's ranch house, and the porch creaked beneath icicles like crystal daggers. The warmth inside was steady, a quiet fire, the smell of stew, the sound of Lila humming as she worked on her schoolwork beside the hearth. Life had settled into something that looked like peace. Each morning, Layla helped with chores. She fed the animals, shoveled snow from the paths, even learned how to ride an old bay gelding named Jasper. Silas taught her how to mend fence wire and sharpen a blade, how to check the sky for weather, how to tie a knot that wouldn't come undone. She soaked it all in like dry earth soaking in rain. And Silas, he was changing too. His eyes didn't seem so tired anymore. He read aloud in the evenings just to hear her laugh at the voices he gave the characters. He carved her a wooden hairbrush for Christmas and wrapped it in paper from an old newspaper. She gave him a drawing of their house with a chimney and hearts drawn in the windows. She wrote Boone Ranch across the top and beneath it, Where I Belong. But peace, like snow, never stays untouched for long. It happened in mid-January. A stranger rode into town. The sheriff, a solid, weathered man named Calvin Dawes, showed up at the ranch the next morning. He brought the wind with him, and the look in his eyes was enough to turn Silas's blood cold. "I need a word." "Silas," he said from the porch, snow crunching beneath his boots. Lila was inside, reading. Silas stepped out, closing the door behind him. "What is it?" he asked. Calvin sighed, pulling his gloves off slowly. "Got a man down at the jailhouse. Says he's kin to the girl. Says he's her uncle." Silas didn't speak. Didn't move. "Names. Clyde Mercer," Calvin continued, "from over in Carbon County. Claims he's her mother's brother. Says he came as soon as he heard she passed." "That right?" Silas said. His voice was low. "Still, wants custody. Says the girl's blood and that you got no legal right to keep her." Silas's jaw tightened. "He got proof?" Calvin hesitated. "Says he's got a birth certificate with both their names on it. That and a letter from the mother." "Letter?" "Scribbled in pencil. Short. Says if anything happens to her to find Clyde." Silas snorted. "Anyone can scribble a note." "I no, that's why I'm here. Truth is, I don't like the look of him. Smells like whiskey and poker tables. But the law don't care much how a man smells." Silas looked out toward the barn where smoke curled gently into the sky. "She don't want to go with him," he said quietly. "She don't even know him. Still might not matter," Calvin said. "You took her in out of kindness. But if he's blood and if that paper holds up, well, it'll be a fight. I'm not letting him take her. I figured you'd say that." They stood in silence for a moment, breath clouding between them. "I'll buy you time," Calvin sighed. "But you'll need more than love to keep her, Silas. You'll need lawyers, proof, witnesses, the whole song and dance." Silas nodded, fists clenched in his coat pockets. Calvin looked toward the window, where Lila's silhouette could be seen behind the curtain, small and unaware. "Just prepare her, if you can." Then he turned and walked back into the wind. Layla knew something was wrong that night. She barely ate her stew. Her spoon stirred circles in the bowl as her eyes flicked up to Silas again and again. He sat heavy at the table, staring into the fire like it was the only thing holding him together. "Who came by?" she asked finally. Silas didn't answer right away. Then he said, "A man." "Who?" he sighed. "Someone claiming to be your uncle." Her face went pale. "I don't got no uncle," she whispered. "Mama never said." "Well, he's saying otherwise. Says he's got rights to you." Her breath hitched. "Are they going to make me leave?" Silas stood and walked to her side. Knelt down. "Not if I have anything to say about it." She looked at him, eyes wide, scared. "I don't want to go," she said, trembling. "I like it here. I want to stay." You're my papa now." He hadn't been ready for those words. Not really. Not the way she said them. He swallowed hard. "And you're my girl," he said. She threw her arms around his neck, and he held her tighter than he'd ever held anything in his life. 2 days later, there was a hearing in town. It was held in the church hall because the county courthouse was too far and the weather too rough. Silas showed up in his best coat, a file of documents in his hand. School reports, statements from the local teacher, letters from neighbors. Even the pastor had written a line about Lila's new life, how she smiled now, how she laughed. Mercer sat on the other side of the room, thin, greasy, with eyes too quick and a suit too nice for someone who claimed to be grieving. He looked like a man used to slipping out of trouble, not raising children. When the judge asked why he wanted custody, Clyde smiled and said, "She's my blood." And I got the letter, her mama's wish. When Lila was asked if she knew him, she said, "No, sir, I never seen him in my life." "Did your mama ever mention a brother?" She shook her head. "Only ever said Silas Boone was the man who helped her once, that if I ever got lost, I should find him. Only him." Silas stood slowly. He looked the judge in the eye and said, "That girl's got a bed in my house, a place at my table, and a seat beside the fire every night. She's got chores and school and laughter. I didn't ask for her to come, but she came. And I told her she could stay forever, and I meant it." The room was quiet. The judge leaned back, long and thoughtful. Then he said the words that hit Silas harder than any bullet. "She stays with Mr. Boone." Clyde cursed under his breath and stormed out. No one stopped him. No one even looked back. But Silas looked down, and there was Layla running across the room to throw her arms around him. "You kept your promise," she whispered. "You said forever." He smiled. He didn't cry, not then. But his hands were shaking as he lifted her into his arms. That night, they rode home in silence, under a sky clear of clouds and full of stars. The snow had stopped. The cold was sharp, but neither of them felt it. When they reached the house, Layla slid from the wagon, looked up at the roof where smoke curled in welcome, and grinned. "Feels more like home now," she said. Silas tipped his hat. "That's 'cause it is." She reached for his hand, and he took it, rough and small, calloused and warm. Together they walked up the steps, not as strangers, not as a man and a lost girl, but as something far greater. Family. The days that followed the hearing felt different. Not louder, not busier. Just lighter. For the first time since the girl arrived, the house no longer felt like it was holding its breath. It was as though the land itself had exhaled, as though the wind no longer rattled the shutters in mourning, but sang softly through the grass with a kind of peace. Winter clung to the earth still, but the sun had begun its slow return. Longer days, gentler winds, the hint of thaw behind the cold. Inside the Boone ranch house, Layla was humming again. It was morning, and she was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, piecing together a jigsaw puzzle someone from the town church had given her. Silas sat nearby, reading the paper, a cup of black coffee in one hand. He wasn't really reading. His eyes kept drifting to her. She'd started doing that a lot, humming, mostly when she was drawing or doing chores. Silas didn't recognize the tunes, and she couldn't explain them. She said they were songs her mother used to hum when cooking or when rocking her to sleep. She didn't remember the words, just the shape of the sounds. "I think maybe Mama made 'em up," she told him once. Silas had nodded. "There's still music." In the weeks that followed, word spread across the county. Silas Boone took in a girl, not out of pity, not by force, but because he chose her, because she chose him. And though there were still some sideways glances and whispers at the general store, most folks came around. Pastor Mark even stopped by the ranch one evening with a freshly baked pie. "She's got spirit," he said with a smile, watching Lila sweep the porch with careful strokes. "Reminds me a little of Clara." Silas had stared into the fading light, his jaw tight. "She's got her own fire." And she did. She started school at the one-room schoolhouse 3 miles out of town. Silas rode with her that first day, rode right up to the front steps. dismounted, and walked her inside. "Don't let him talk circles around you," he told her, patting her shoulder. "If anyone bothers you, they won't." She grinned. "You're my pa now. They know better," he smirked. "That right?" She nodded firmly. "You're the scariest cowboy I know." He chuckled as she ran off inside, braid bouncing, boots kicking up dust. It wasn't easy. She was behind in reading and math. The other girls had dresses in better shape. The boys teased her sometimes, called her orphan girl behind her back. But she never let them see her cry. Never once. And when the teacher told Silas she'd stood up for another boy being picked on, Silas just tipped his hat and said, "She's got a good compass." That evening, he whittled her a little star out of wood and tied it on a leather cord. "For being brave," he said, handing it to her. She held it like treasure. Their life deepened, not in grand gestures, but in quiet moments. Layla began baking. She'd stand on a wooden crate in the kitchen, flour smudged across her nose, hair tied in a messy knot. Her biscuits were rock hard at first. Silas nearly cracked a tooth pretending they were good. She caught him once, chewing slowly with a forced smile. "You don't have to lie," she said, laughing. "I know they're terrible." He shrugged. They got hard. So they practiced together. By spring, she'd mastered the recipe, and when they brought a tin of them to the neighbors, even old Martha Goodwin admitted they weren't half bad. Layla beamed all the way home. One afternoon in April, Silas took her riding beyond the Buffet ranch fence, a place he hadn't visited since Clara passed. It was a quiet valley tucked between two hills, where wildflowers bloomed early and deer came to drink from a shallow creek. He helped her off the horse, then pointed to a simple marker. "At the base of a cottonwood tree. Clara's resting here," he said softly. "She always liked this spot." Layla stepped closer. "She was your wife?" He nodded. "Double quotes. Do you think she'd be mad?" She asked suddenly. Silas turned to her. "About what?" "That I'm living here. That you're taking care of me instead of her." His throat tightened. He knelt in front of her, voice steady. "She'd love you, Layla. She'd think you're brave. She'd think I finally did something right." Layla's eyes filled. She bent down and placed a small flower at the base of the tree. Then, standing beside Silas, she whispered, "Hi, Miss Clara. I'll help take care of him." And Silas finally let the tears fall. Not long after, the official papers came. Adoption, legal custody. Sealed and notarized, the sheriff brought them in person, tipped his hat, and handed them to Silas without ceremony. "Guess it's official now," Calvin said. "She's yours." Silas looked down at the paper, at her name, at his. Then he turned to Layla. "You good with this?" he asked. She nodded, beaming. "You? I reckon I've been good with it since you knocked on my door." That night, they had a small celebration, just the two of them. Layla baked a cake, lopsided too, sweet and perfect. Silas gave her a silver locket he'd been saving for years, tucked away in a drawer meant for dreams that never came true. Inside it was a tiny picture, a sketch of her and him, drawn by hand. Above it she'd written, "Forever Family." She didn't cry when she opened it, but she didn't stop hugging him either. From then on, everything they did felt more rooted. Layla started keeping a journal. She wrote about cows and creeks and Silas's snoring. She wrote about Buttons, the goat she lost, and about the mama she missed every day. Silas read it once when she let him. At the bottom of one page, in careful handwriting, she'd written, "He saved me, but he doesn't know I saved him too." He folded the page like scripture and placed it in his Bible, because it was true. That summer, they took their first photo together. They stood outside the ranch house, him in a clean shirt, her in a yellow dress. She was grinning, arms wrapped around his waist. He wasn't smiling, not fully. but his eyes were warm, open. The photographer asked if they wanted to be called Mr. Boone and Daughter. Silas looked at Lila. She shrugged. Then she said, "Just say family. That's what we are." The photo still hangs above the fireplace, right where it belongs. Time didn't wait, it never had. But on the Boone Ranch, time didn't feel like an enemy anymore. It felt like a quiet guest, uninvited maybe, but not unwelcome. Just a constant presence, sitting on the porch with them, sipping the same wind. Watching life unfold. Spring melted into summer, and Lila grew. She got taller, almost up to Silas's shoulder now. Her voice held more confidence. Her laugh came easier. She'd taken over most of the cooking and knew how to ride with her. Eyes closed, not that Silas let her do that. Not often, anyway. She started reading books thicker than her arm, sketching scenes from ranch life in charcoal. Her drawings lined the hallway, her ma's memory, Clara's tree, Buttons the goat, and Silas himself, carved in gentle shadows. Sometimes Silas would catch her staring off into the horizon, face quiet. "You thinkin'?" he'd ask. "Always," she'd grin. "You raised me that way." One cold October day, a letter came addressed to Lila, bearing the seal of a city far east. A scholarship. A chance to study art and education in the capital. Silas read it twice. "You're wanted," he said, voice low. She looked up from the letter, lips pressed tight. "So what do I do?" He didn't answer right away. He looked out the window instead. Past the fading trees, past the barn, to the ridgeline where Clara once walked. Then he turned to her. "You go," he said. "You make something. Not just for you. For her, too." Layla stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. She didn't cry, but her voice trembled. "You'll be okay?" "I've been okay since the day you showed up." The day she left, the ranch felt bigger than usual. Too big. Silas stood on the porch, hat in hand, watching her stagecoach disappear over the hill. He didn't wave. He just stood there, chest hollow and full all at once. Buttons Jr., the second, nuzzled his hand. "Yeah," Silas muttered. "She come back. Always said this was home." And he believed it. Letters came, dozens of them, scribbled and sketched, filled with city noise, street stories, and portraits of classmates. Lila wrote about professors who frowned too much and dormitory bread that tasted like regret, but every letter ended the same. "Love you, Pa. I'll be back before you can say burnt biscuits." He never threw a single one away, and she did come back. Not once, not twice. Every holiday, every summer. Sometimes just because she rode in with wind in her hair and stories on her tongue, filling the house with color and chaos and life. Each time she stayed a little longer. Each time it felt a little more like she never left. Then one day she didn't leave at all. She stayed. Years passed. The ranch kept going, quieter now, slower, but full of steady rhythm. Lila began teaching at the local school. Kids came from all over to learn from Miss Boone, the artist lady who makes you believe in stars. Silas grew older. His hands, once leather tough, began to tremble when holding a hammer. His steps slowed. But his eyes never lost their spark, the one Lila had put there. One winter, the snow came heavy. Silas took to sitting by the fire more. He watched the flames dance like old memories. One night, Lila brought him tea. She sat by his feet, head resting against his knee. "Remember when I asked if I could stay for a day?" She whispered. He chuckled, soft and warm. "You stayed forever." She smiled. "Not long enough to matter." When Silas passed, it was quiet. Peaceful. He was sitting in his favorite chair, the Bible open beside him, Lila's, drawing tucked between the pages. A fire glowed. The wind whispered outside. Layla found him in the morning, hat still on his lap. eyes closed as if he were dreaming of cattle and spring. She didn't cry right away. She made coffee first, sat in the chair beside him, held his weathered hand and whispered, "I'll take care of it now." And she did. The ranch lived on Dot, so did his name. Kids grew up hearing stories of the gruff cowboy who adopted a girl with nothing but a broken heart and turned her into gold. Artists came to paint the hills Leela once sketched as a child. Writers came to listen. And Lila told them all the truth. "He saved me with one sentence," she always said. They'd ask, "What did he say?" And she'd smile, soft and certain, "You can stay forever." Final scene. A new girl knocks on the ranch house door. Tears in her eyes. She clutches a worn backpack and a locket in her hand. Lila, older now, opens the door, recognizing the weight in the child's voice. "My mama, she's gone. Can I stay? For just a little while?" Leila bends down, smiles gently, and echoes the words that changed her life. "You can stay forever."